everyone riding those stuff are going on the actual roads. What is that up there and how did they even get up there? Looks like a rake. Seeing that rake on top of there is a perfect example of why it's good to have, I guess, right now, the drones that are under 250 here in Canada. You just want to get like a really quick shot to see, hey, what is that? You want to fly your drone, get the aerial view. It's actually in a controlled airspace, so imagine if you didn't have the permission and all that, or you don't have the ability to get it in general. How are you going to get the shot afterwards? Even for the larger drone, in my opinion, those should be perfectly fine. Controlled airspace or not, it depends on how you're using it, in my opinion. To me, it still feels a little silly, basically contacting all the airspace and stuff like that for something that simple. I can see again, if I'm flying like within the paths of airplanes at that height and everything like that, then yeah, probably, but not in a case like this, like you're next to like what, buildings and all that too. Funny enough, I know they usually say for manned aviation, birds are the biggest concerns for them. In this case, honestly, for stuff like that, I'd be more concerned probably over a bird than a large commercial airline or something like that, considering the area and where you're flying, what's around you. Man, if you have a plane flying that low with all those buildings and stuff, we got bigger problems here. I actually wanted to see if I could mix up the Mavic Pro footage with the Mini one today too as the test. And actually flying near that stone, I wanted to test it out to affect the Wi-Fi. There was times where when you had the drone up, it seemed like it was moving like in various places. So obviously it affects the connection and all that. This makes me think how ironically it actually is safer to use like the bigger drone, but this one gives you the most freedom. Apparently we're going to prepare for more rain and stuff too. They said it was actually supposed to be snowing, at least in some areas here. It says Vancouver weather, at least 7 days straight of rain heading into the new year. Well, that's going to be fantastic, isn't it? It seems like there's so much rain this year. I know it's pretty common around the area here, but usually there would be at least something like snow or whatever from the previous years. I've only had that white Christmas once in that year, if you guys remember. Got some really awesome drone footage for that too. It's kind of interesting reading this today with everyone afraid of people using consumer drones as a weapon of sort. This one says, a drone was destroyed by a F-16 with a guided rocket. As the militaries of the world struggle to adapt to the threat posed by small, cheap drones, sometimes the obvious needs answering. Which is why when the Air Force announced that a fighter jet had successfully shot down a small drone, it caught the attention of the counter-drone world. Major Jeffrey Entine, flying an F-16C with the 85th Flight Test Squadron, shot a rocket at a test drone near England Air Force Base in Florida, December 19th, according to a statement from the service. The stated purpose of the test was to, quote, demonstrate shooting a small drone at low altitudes and appears to have been a success. While small drones may call to mind hobbyist quadcopters or the tactical drones used by infantry, the target drone in question was a BQM-167, a kind of drone specifically designed as an aerial target. With a length of 20 feet tip to tail and a maximum gross takeoff weight of over 2,000 pounds, the BQM-167 is a small and only in relation to the jet fighter that shot it down. It says confusing target drone for hobbyist quadcopters is full circle for military terminology. For decades, the most popular use of drone in military circles was a collective term for flying aerial targets. Training human pilots and gunners on simple moving targets is a long-standing practice. It reminds me like you're training someone like with a video game because you do it all the time in terms of flying around something and firing at targets. Obviously real life is different, but I would assume it is really similar in terms of the hand and eye coordination and all that. And it's interesting reading this. It basically relates to that story yesterday I talked about where apparently in the US the FAA wants to announce a formal standard in terms of tracking every single drone. So it makes you wonder, in terms of the drones that you have, if that's the case, then does that mean you're going to have to retrofit like your drones with these equipment and all that? And if so, how much does it cost? And which manufacturer is actually going to, I guess, benefit or lose out the most of it? So it's kind of interesting just reading how, I guess, it says like in a DJI press release, it says DJI reviewing FAA proposal to identify drones in American skies. The FAA proposal outlines its own approach to identify airborne drones, which is a major step toward integrating drones into everyday life for business, government, education, photography, and fun. And it says DJI is carefully reviewing the FAA's proposed rule and encourage all its customers and partners in the drone industry to do the same in preparation for the submission of written comments to the FAA early next year. And I guess according to this, a company like DJI actually supports stuff like this. It says DJI has long advocated for a remote identification system that will provide safety, security, and accountability for authorities, said Brendan Shulman, DJI Vice President of Policy and Legal Affairs. As we review the FAA's proposal, we will be guided by the principle recognized by the FAA's own Aviation Rulemaking Committee in 2017 that remote identification will not be successful if the burdens and costs to drone operators are not minimized. And it basically talks about how they as a company have been doing this, I guess, for a while for their own products. It says DJI deployed its own remote identification system, Aeroscope, more than 2 years ago to provide authorities with real-time information about drones and their pilots near airports, critical infrastructures, stadium, large public gatherings, and other critical locations. And as well, the recent announcement where people can track things on their phone, like the drones, it says DJI also recently demonstrated a direct drone-to-phone remote identification solution, which would broadcast identifying and tracking information from the drone directly to nearby mobile phones using collaborative standard developed by ASTM International. So what was interesting reading about stuff like this is how a lot of people obviously are divided by the issue. But the issue here revolves around the fact that if a company endorses and promotes the standard, so to speak, of having every single drone be monitored, I guess, irregardless of what they're doing, it's just interesting reading how everyone's saying they're not going to support a company that does that, for example. And it makes you wonder how many people would actually care ultimately, like in this case. I guess the geofence is the perfect example right now. It's not really tracking, but it blocks you from flying like in certain places, like with the DJI. Whereas a company like Skydio, to my knowledge, they said they're not implementing stuff like that unless it's absolutely mandatory. So like there, would you actually base your purchase decision like that based on whether or not the company endorses restrictions in that way? Or should it be all up to you? Like a car, for example. You own the car, it's not any tracked in any way, you do something stupid with it, then you get punished. There just has to be better distinction between how people are using something and all that. You can't treat everything like a huge aircraft, in my opinion. Again, that rake example was the perfect example. Just if having to go through, like for example, all the Nav Canada and stuff like that, at least here, to get a simple shot like that, to me it seems so redundant and unnecessary in cases like that. If you're flying like within an airport or whatever, at the height of a plane, etc., then yeah, it's a little different. That's horrible. Who did this? Alright, see you guys later.